Welcome to the AI Institute for Next Generation Food Systems Fall Speaker Series. My name is Hannah Bartram, and I am the APHIS Education and Public Engagement Coordinator. Today, we are delighted to welcome Dr. Abigail Stevenson discussing how AI can improve food safety, helping to enable safe food for all. A quick introduction to the AI Institute for Next Generation Food Systems, also known as AIFS or APHIS. The Institute was established last year under an NSF USDA NIFA grant with the mission of developing and leveraging transformative AI for the ethical production and distribution of safe, sustainable, nutritious food with fewer resources. APHIS is a multidisciplinary collaboration between researchers at 6 different institutions conducting research with a holistic integrated view of the food system, solving challenges in molecular breeding, agricultural production, food processing and distribution, and nutrition, also focusing on the people behind the food system, using AI and technology as an enabler. If you would like more information on the research and engagement activities of APHIS, please visit our website and connect with us on social media. Our speaker series features thought leaders addressing food system challenges using artificial intelligence. We hope you will join us again for the last event in our series, our panel discussion on December 8th with all 3 of our speakers from this fall. You can register for this event at the link at the bottom of your screen. As always, the recordings from our speaker series will be posted to our YouTube channel. Today, we are delighted to welcome our 3rd speaker. Dr. Abigail Stevenson is Vice President of the Mars Advanced Research Institute, MARI. In this role, Dr. Stevenson leads the MARI team responsible for connecting Mars with emerging areas of science and technology in the fields of sustainability, health and wellness, and computational science. Prior to joining MARI, Dr. Stevenson was the director of the Mars Global Food Safety Center, where she led a global team addressing the most significant food safety challenges facing global food supply chains. Under Dr. Stevenson's leadership, the Mars Global Food Safety Center focused on 3 critical areas of food safety: microbial risk management, mycotoxin risk management, and food integrity. There will be time for questions at the end, so I would encourage you to submit your questions throughout the talk in the question and answer section. There is also closed captioning available today. Welcome, Abby. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen now, and I'll put them on full screen. How does that look?
That looks good. Excellent.
Great. Thank you very much. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be here today. And it's a real honor to be part of the Industry Advisory Board, working with and supporting APHIS. I have a lot to learn in the area of AI and data analytics. And this is a wonderful opportunity to bring together some of the knowledge we have within industry and within science and technology more broadly, together with these emerging capabilities. And today I'm going to explore a little bit together with you how we see AI improving food safety and really helping enable safe food for all. This is a combination of work that we're doing through the Mars Advanced Research Institute, together with our partners at the Mars Global Food Safety Center, and also a network of strategic partners. And one of the most critical strategic partners that we've had in the network for the Mars Advanced Research Institute for a long period of time, and in Mars more generally, is UC Davis. So it's a real honor to now pick up the banner and carry forward that strategic partnership to help build safe food supply chains. And so first of all, before I go into a bit more about food safety and the potential AI has and data has for transforming our approach to food safety, I just wanted to share a little bit more about Mars and who Mars is, really to give you an idea of the breadth of the footprint that we have and the complexity of the supply chains that we have. So we're a company that is split into 4 different segments, and the Mars business is really underpinned by the 5 principles that that really all of the segments within Mars share: the quality, responsibility, mutuality, efficiency, and freedom. And we are a family-owned business started in 1911 by Frank Mars. And this enables us to take a long-term view, to really work collaboratively and for mutual benefit for everyone across our supply chains, and to look at the future of food supply chains, of the planet more generally, and take a deeply rooted long-term approach where science and technology are really critical to the future of our business. And that's a belief that has been in the business and held dear by the family, who are still very involved in the business today. And so today we truly have a global footprint. We're present in more than 80 countries, and we operate across both the pet care, pet food and pet services, including veterinary services, laboratory diagnostics, in the Mars Wrigley confectionery and snacking space, in the Mars food businesses, and most recently in Mars Edge, which is our emerging segment focused on better lives through nutrition, where we're really focused on the future of health and nutrition in people. It's a very diverse range of interests here that all are underpinned by a deeply rooted belief in the long-term science and technology-driven future of our business. So a little bit more about the Mars Advanced Research Institute and where we fit within Mars Incorporated. We are a research institute that really focuses on connecting Mars across all those segments and looking at the future direction for our business, connecting Mars with emerging science and technology, really looking at how we can spark discoveries that invent the future of our businesses. And we do that through collaboration, deeply embedded in the external world. Everything that we do in MARI is done together with partners in the academic, technology, science institute world. And we're really bridging from that future emerging science back into our business from a position that is deeply rooted in science and technology and deeply rooted in that emerging external world. And you can see here on the right the focus areas that we're working in here, and very relevant to what I'm going to come on to talk about today. Computational science, computational driven discovery is central to everything we do today, recognizing that this emerging area of science is critical to food supply chains of the future. We've deeply embedded this capability within our team and in our partner network. And we're using computational driven discovery to explore the emerging science space across food safety that I'm going to share a bit more about today. Next generation packaging, really looking at the world of transformational packaging that is safe for the environment, that provides the same kind of or even greater protection for food, ensuring safe food, while minimizing or even potentially benefiting the environment and the economy of recycling as well. And we're also exploring the future of raw materials, and again, very close synergy there with food safety. And we're also exploring the world of health and wellness, building capabilities for the next generation of innovations within our business. And the reason we're exploring food safety really is because it is the fundamental requirement for delivering food security. And I just included here the definition from the World Food Summit and adopted by the FAO for food security, because it exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to safe, sufficient, and nutritious food. And this is really the challenge that we're facing today across the food supply chain, with the growing population that we have, with the challenge we have in growing food sustainably, that does not take out more from the planet than we put back in. And we're facing an enormous challenge within the food supply chain in feeding people with the right nutrition, with the right safe food to enable us to meet the nutritional needs in a way that enables people to have that active and healthy life. The challenge has never been greater. And why is that important to Mars? Because actually our agricultural food footprint is significant. We recognize that we are part of the supply chain and that we have a shared responsibility for a sustainable, and I mean sustainable in the broadest sense of the word, when it comes to meeting food security demands, when it comes to ensuring that the farmers involved in producing food have sustainable long-term incomes, when it comes to producing enough food safely. We share responsibility for that because we're part of the agricultural environmental footprint. And you can see here we utilize a large, a pretty diverse range of different raw materials. Some of whom, we've been working with Davis for many years to help unlock the science behind some of these areas, where we work very closely with Davis in the areas of cocoa, in nuts, and in various other areas. We're exploring the world of science and technology to help unlock the next generation of breakthroughs that enable us to be part of a responsible agricultural and food supply chain. And food safety is a really critical element of that. And that's why in 2015, we set up the Mars Global Food Safety Center, really focused on 3 areas of food safety, as Hannah mentioned. And these were we identified as the biggest challenges facing both Mars and supply chains more broadly, because the remit of the Mars Global Food Safety Center is much broader than ensuring Mars food supply chains are safe. We actually believe we have a really important role in helping ensure that the food supply chains that we are part of are enabling safe food for all. And so the work done through the Global Food Safety Center in collaboration with the Mars Advanced Research Institute and a critical network of partners is helping raise the bar for food safety more broadly. And today I'm going to share a little bit about the insights that we've gained through our work in food safety and how we're leveraging or seeing the potential for leveraging AI to start to address some of these challenges, many of which have been around for decades. A lot of these challenges we face today are not new. They're just in heightened focus because of the pressure that the food supply chains are under today, driven by this, the dynamic that brings together sustainability challenges, population challenges, and increasing regulation, the complexity of food supply chains today. There are multiple factors that are just really heightening the focus needed to ensure that people have access to safe food. And so we have here microbial risk, and this is an area I'll talk a little bit more here about the potential for us to move to more predictive and preventative approaches to microbial risk management. Same with mycotoxin risk. I think there's more data generated within the food industry today than ever before. And we have the potential to harness that data to enable us to really transform our approach to food safety. And then food integrity. In this area, we know that food fraud has a huge impact, both on actual cost and of either wasted food, or in misleading consumers and breaking the trust that people have in food and the food supply chains. So some really significant challenges that everyone involved in the food supply chain can relate to in some shape or form. And we have a shared responsibility as an industry and as regulators, academics within this industry, working together. It's a shared responsibility for everyone to be part of the solutions to the challenges, huge challenges we face. Within the industry, we have a responsibility to share the knowledge we have, and to help raise the bar in the approaches that we take, and in helping drive forward the research in areas where new knowledge is needed, and above all the ability to collaborate, share knowledge, and together understand the biggest opportunities, gaps, challenges facing food supply chains. And that's why it's a real privilege to be part of the work you guys are doing through APHIS, and to be able to come together with like-minded people working in this space where we can truly drive a collaborative transformational approach. So a little bit more about the risks and where these are across the food safety continuum, really. And there are different opportunities to intervene right across the supply chain, where food security and food safety come together to build more resilient supply chains. And of course, we're faced on one side by the challenges that climate change are bringing. And at the moment, I think we don't have a full appreciation yet for the impact that some of these that climate change is going to have on many of the crops that we grow today, and the changes that that's going to bring to both the geographical distribution of these and the way that we produce agriculture today. And then you lay over the top of that the need for us to reduce our impact on the environment, reduce the carbon in the atmosphere and the environmental footprint that agriculture brings. And it creates some real opportunities to transform the way we produce our food. And data and artificial intelligence are going to be key in both predicting the interventions and in predicting the impact that the changes that we see through climate change are going to have on our agricultural footprint. We can intervene through the agricultural production, through the food manufacturing, and through the point of sale as well, in the way that the data generated at each stage of the production could be leveraged in order to move us to a more predictive and preventive approach to food production. A little bit more about the opportunities and the challenges as I see them, and really thinking very broadly across the food industry. We have opportunities to move towards prediction and prevention in many different places. There are opportunities for more active monitoring, for collection of data in more systemic ways that enable us to interpret data and model data in ways that we haven't necessarily thought about today. And that enables more identification of patterns, that enables us to ultimately see patterns and predict and prevent incidents before they happen. And then how, I think one of the biggest questions that I currently have is how we then scale that across industries. How do we facilitate sharing? How do we enable discussions between different industry partners, together with academia, together with technology companies, to come up with solutions that are integrated across food supply chains and scaled across the industry? And how do we enable controls and standards that encourage and actually and operationalize prediction and prevention? We still have in many places in food safety very traditional approaches, which is around identify and then put in mitigations. And at times this is too late. You already have the risk within the food supply chain, and to enable us to move to truly realize the opportunity to predict and prevent, there are several challenges that I'm sure anyone in the food industry or working with the food industry today can relate to. We haven't yet found really effective ways to share data or pull in data from different parts of the industry, or even between different industry partners, to facilitate sharing in a way that is safe and secure, and to enable us to either share best practice or look for trends that exist across the industry, and not just within individual either factories or companies or industry partners individually, all doing their own different things in different ways. We have increased regulatory inquiries in requirements, but they are diverse. Many different geographies have different types of regulation, and at times we're lacking standardized methods. And regulatory requirements are often becoming so stringent and not always based on science, not always based on evidence, and sometimes also not always based on common sense or what makes sense for people's safety, for practicalities, for feeding people, and the challenges that creates. And at times people are taking very different approaches to the same challenge, often good because it facilitates multidisciplinary approaches, different ways to tackle the same problem. But at certain times, when it comes to then enabling efficient, effective regulation, we need to then standardize and scale rather than having diversity of approaches. And as they mature, sometimes there are opportunities for standardization of the different approaches and how we actually codify and standardize. So thinking about that and transforming food safety, it's a combination of bringing together domain knowledge, data, science, artificial intelligence, and we need new capabilities to realize some of the opportunities. Millions and millions, if not billions, of data points are generated by the food industry every day. Many of those stay in-house. Many of those are not necessarily even collated and rolled up into global approaches across within an industry part, one particular company at the moment. And so how do we effectively collect and integrate data? And how do we do that in a way that enables and facilitates sharing and best practice and learning from each other? And do it in a way that provides a safe place to do that. We see opportunity in the omics space, genomics, metagenomics, multi-omics. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the emerging science in that space that is showing potential. And then harnessing that to the data together with artificial intelligence. How do we enable our industry and industry as a whole in the food supply chain to leverage artificial intelligence and to move to prediction? And of course, high performance computing, that's an obvious one, but companies are, you guys are on the cutting edge. And in many places, we still don't have the capabilities needed to fully handle and understand the data that is being generated within the food industry today. And this is so today I'm going to talk a little bit more about data. We are starting to harness some of that and within our own business to look at how we can learn from our own data and be more predictive in-house. And that is something that has required a pretty heavy lift in terms of putting the right infrastructure in place just to provide the right foundation. And we're well on the way with that from an operational point of view today. We're also exploring the microbiome of our raw materials and the potential for us to leverage microbiome and genomics in the food safety space. And we're doing that in collaboration with partners. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But I wanted to start with an example here of a nice example of a group who are trying to create that sharing and best practice space. And this is a group led by Queen's University in Belfast that I thought was a very interesting case study to share. It's called the Food Industry Intelligence Network, or FIN. And it's a group that are really working together to identify and target vulnerable areas in the food supply chain. And they do this through becoming a member as industry partners. This started, I don't know if anybody remembers, but in Europe a few years ago, I think it's about 2015, we had an incident that ended up being called the Horsemeat scandal, where in a number of human food products, they were contaminated, the beef products were contaminated by horsemeat. And that created a pretty high level of distrust in food supply chains, and governments needed to act to put in preventative measures that started to rebuild trust in the food supply chain and actually enable more sharing, more transparency in food supply chains. And so it was established in 2015 in response to this, to work done through the Queen's University, where they explored measures that should be put in place to prevent such a scandal happening again. And as a result of that investigation, they created a safe haven where they've created essentially a portal where they collect, collate, and analyze information submitted by food and drink industry partners to, they submit their authenticity tests. These are pooled, and every year they share out a report on this, pulling together all the data from all the individual parties that come together in this independently run forum that collates and analyzes all the data. I mean, this is only really the tip of the iceberg, but I thought it's a really interesting example to look at in terms of how we can create these places for industry sharing and to enable us to look for early warning signals, signs that we can share across the food industry early, enabling people to take action before a food incident actually becomes a really big issue. And so today there are 47 industry partners, and Mars is a member of this, and we obtain the reports from that. But I think it's a very interesting early example of how data is being collated and analyzed and then shared out in order for everyone in the industry to learn. And the collaboration here between academia, industry, and governments in terms of driving up food safety and enabling sharing of insights and intelligence. Another area I wanted to share, which is more on the emerging science and technology space, is how genomics is starting to transform the approach to food safety. And really, some of the work done in this area has explored whether it's possible to understand how genomics, are the genomic footprints for different raw materials? Could we use our understanding of microbial ecology to really take a different approach to food safety? Are there potential early indicators of changes within the food supply chain that we can leverage to, again, move to a more predictive and preventive approach, leveraging whole genome sequencing and often public data and there's quite a lot of whole genome sequencing data out in the public domain now. How can we harness and leverage the power of data being produced by regulators, by industry, to understand microbial environments within food supply chain and look for early warning signals? So some early work has been done here, and this was a consortium set up in 2015 that Mars was a part of, together with IBM and some other industry partners. Davis were very much part of this group as well through Bart Weimer, really helping to drive forward the potential for genomics. And we've, over the last 5 years, achieved some early indicators that this area has potential. There is a lot more to do, and it's still at an early stage in terms of being truly operational in leveraging the microbial environment and the microbiome to understand how factories behave, how the microbiome behaves as you get potential changes in the microbiome, and in understanding what that means. But certainly we've provided some evidence that this area has huge potential. The opportunity here really comes from bringing together academia, technology companies, industries, regulators together, and really exploring this from different perspectives to understand how we can leverage domain knowledge, existing knowledge within manufacturers, bring that together with the emerging science in computational capability and in the microbiome and metagenomics, and bringing that together with the latest understanding in predictive and preventive measures, and bringing all of those together to explore a different approach. Where are we today? I mean, there is a large amount of data available publicly, and it's growing through forums such as NCBI. We see it's growing in specific areas that are relevant to food safety today, but it's by no means complete. And to enable us to fully leverage this to support food safety in the future, we need to continue to grow and expand curated databases. And we need to perhaps standardize some of the measures, like the quality of the whole genome sequencing data. It's very variable quality, and to truly use it for operational food safety. There are some new standards in whole genome sequencing that need to be put in place, and there's work ongoing here in terms of ISO standards and various other things happening out there that is driving a more standardized approach. And this again is being done through collaborative approaches, through like-minded industry partners, through academic groups, really working together to bring the latest science and that domain knowledge together to really drive this area forward. And so we continue to call for action in the area of continuing to build out data and to put the right quality measures in place that enable the public data to continue to expand and to enable the right focus on analytics. But what has been done today so far through this consortium approach, we certainly confirmed that we can identify a biome, that microbiomes exist in food, in raw materials. And some of this work, as you can see here, has been already shared through publications and through substantial collaboration, showing that we can create raw material baselines, that we can identify organisms in samples, and we can do this with a good level of accuracy, and we can show variation from normal in terms of profiles certainly on an individual raw material basis. We have proved the concept, but there is much more to do to take this from proof of concept through to something that could become an operational standard at some point in the future. So again, early promise, but much more to do in terms of turning this from interesting science with potential to operational application. And the third example I wanted to share here was another area of food safety where a lot of work has already been done, really looking at aflatoxins as one of the most deadly fungal contaminants that can contaminate corn, peanuts, and many other commodity raw materials that are critical to food supply chains here. And again, taking a collaborative approach, we've had a look at whether it be possible to predict the risk of aflatoxins using modeling approaches. And again, this work was done leveraging domain knowledge that through our supply chains and our suppliers, and bringing that together with cutting edge research from Cambridge University in this case. And then we've really been working with partners to start to operationalize the science in this space, looking at agricultural practices. So we've looked right across the supply chain at the biggest areas of risk for aflatoxin formation, looking at agricultural practices, climate, crop varieties and treatments. And again, we've looked at a number of different geographies from Thailand, India, Brazil, places that corn, in this instance, we were looking at corn as a use case example that is critical to food supply chains for both people and pets. And we looked at harvesting, maturity, at harvest, moisture, disease state, many different factors that all come together to contribute to aflatoxin formation. Just because the fungus is there doesn't necessarily mean it produces aflatoxin. There need to be specific triggers that happen at many different points during across the supply chain. And we took a comprehensive, holistic view of all these factors and use them to create a risk prediction model for aflatoxin formation in corn. And so we took all of these and combined the factors with current meteorological data and use that to predict Aspergillus flavus growth rates and aflatoxin production in maize across growth, transport, and storage, and created a pre-harvest, post-harvest, and use these models to form a risk prediction capability. Again, this is in the early stages of operational development. We are starting to use it in-house within our own supply chains as part of our risk assessment when we're sourcing corn. And we started to see that we can predict hotspots, and we can use this work as part of our sourcing strategy to help inform the places where we may choose to source from. And they change year on year. And so we have the capability through this tool to start to leverage modeling and data, huge volumes of climate data, to validate and verify our sourcing strategy going forward. Year on year, we're starting to use these tools. Again, a lot more to do, but I think we start to see the potential for us to leverage artificial intelligence to help move from more traditional sourcing, sampling, analysis in the moment. And we still do a lot of at-gate testing for our sourcing, as I'm sure many industry partners do. But we fully believe that we should be able to become far more predictive and preventive in our ways of working in this space going forward. And so really that brings to a close what I was going to share today. In summary, artificial intelligence combined with data analytics, we see the huge potential for it to transform approaches to food safety. We also see that there's so much to be done and so much more that we can do together to move us from reactive to predictive and preventive, which is good for everybody. I mean, we have so much food today is wasted because by the time the testing is done, it's too late. Either crops left in the field to spoil because they aren't safe or they don't meet test parameters in the field, through to finished products that don't pass positive release or end of product testing. And there is a lot of food waste across the food supply chain today. We have a huge opportunity to reduce the amount of food waste in the food industry and in agriculture. The approach we need to take is long-term, and it needs to be collaborative between industry, academia, governments, NGOs, and we know that no one entity can solve these problems alone, and that if it isn't safe, it isn't food. And this is probably part of one of the biggest challenges facing society today, how we can feed appropriate, nutritious, safe food to the human race going forward is one of the biggest challenges facing us all today. And thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts about how artificial intelligence is transforming food safety. I'm more than happy to open a discussion.
Yes, thank you so much, Abby. That was a really excellent overview of the challenges and potential solutions for increasing food safety. I'd encourage everyone to add your questions in the Q&A section so we can get a discussion going. And there's a question here, and I have kind of a tag-on question here. Is there a US equivalent to the FIN system, so the Food Industry Intelligence Network you mentioned? It would seem a useful tool, especially from a collaboration standpoint. And then to add on, I was also curious about the funding for FIN, what that model looks like. Is it a public-private partnership, or is it funded by the companies that are part of it?
Yeah, and Hannah, if I take yours first, it is funded through membership and also some government funding as well. So it is a public-private partnership, absolutely. And the government funded some of the initial investigation into the root causes of the triggers that enabled FIN to be established. And then there was a call to action and a call for industry members. And the subscription depends on the size of the organization joining. It's tiered depending on the size of the company. Yeah, and then the other question about FIN elsewhere, I don't know of anything elsewhere at the moment. I think it's something I think would be worth exploring, whether there is a way to scale this, given regulations and government approaches are different between, across geographies, even from state to state, sometimes here within the US. I think we would need to really explore what that could mean within a US context.
Yeah, something for us to aspire to, certainly, in the US. All right, we'll move on to the next question. You gave a number of great examples of how universities, governments, and industry work together to solve big challenges, and how MARI engages with institutions like UC Davis. How does MARI think about engaging pre-competitively in open innovation efforts while preserving its own IP and advancing its business? And how can entities like APHIS support these collaborations while ensuring industry interest?
That's a great question. And I have to say, in some areas for MARI and for Mars in general, like food safety, we are very proactively taking a pre-competitive approach, because we believe safe food benefits everyone within the food supply chain, and a food safety incident benefits no one. So the safer and the better everyone can be, and the more sharing and best practice, and the more we take common approaches that enable us to share data and standardized approaches too, the better the food industry will be. In some areas, it's where there is potential IP, competitive advantage, it is a bigger challenge. And I wouldn't say that as Mars we have all the answers yet in this space about how to do this really well. We're still learning ourselves, and as a industry partner in APHIS, that is definitely something we're exploring, how we do this better, because we still have challenges for sure.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions out there? Give everyone a moment.
If I can just add while people are thinking to what I said before, because I think that the challenge we have now in addressing climate change and in agriculture is going to require industry as a whole to take a different approach to collaboration in understanding carbon sequestration, in net zero targets. That's something I don't have the answer to, but what I do know is that the traditional approaches that that industry has perhaps taken are not going to be enough for us to address together the challenges that we face going forward in protecting our planet for future generations. And we need to explore a different approach, for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of space for innovation there.
Yeah, and different thinking, challenging our own thinking around this space. And what is open innovation? How can we do that in a way that mutually benefits everyone? Yeah, it's a big challenge. I think even at COP26, we saw some of that with individual countries perhaps protecting themselves, and really it's no different when you think about all stakeholders involved, from governments, regulators, industry partners, academia. A different approach is needed, and I think it's starting to emerge, but there's a lot more to be done to really drive clarity around how we across the ecosystem work together in a way that benefits everyone.
Yeah, and I imagine that privacy is a pretty big concern in terms of data sharing across industry. How do you deal with those concerns?
It's a huge concern. It is for many reasons, not just because the data are seen as assets, but because data in the wrong hands can potentially be used in the wrong way. So how do we ensure that data protection is there to protect everyone? I think that's why Finn's an interesting example, because they've managed to do something in a way that enables sharing and generation of insights while providing what they call a safe haven that protects everyone involved in that, including the academic group, because there's an independent body that kind of brokers the conversation, and then an advisory board as well. So the way that's set up is actually a really interesting model, because it does provide that level of data security and safety.
Yeah, that's fantastic. A lot of thought has been put into that, I'm sure. Here's another question. There are repeated issues with pet food, specifically dog food, being toxic or not balanced. How does a pet parent know how to access research on this? It's very frustrating, and how often this seems to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only way we can do that is through there are trade associations, there are industry bodies, like, for example, the Pet Food Industry Group, that are setting standards. There are many things being done to drive safety in pet food, and we are addressing that all the time as a pet food manufacturer. We're taking all the steps we can to ensure. I have 3 dogs myself. I know as a pet parent how important it is to that we can trust the food we feed to our pets. And all I can say is go to a very responsible manufacturer, and there are a lot of regulations in place. There's new research all the time, and we are always trying to investigate root causes, but it's not without challenges as across the food supply chain. And there is always more to be done. And moving towards prediction and prevention is the ultimate goal, because nobody wants to release food that's not safe.
Yeah, certainly.
Whether it's for people or for pets.
Right.
Yeah.
And then this next question is from the chat. What kinds of activities can APHIS do related to creating an AI platform to support the many great use cases you mentioned? What AI tools and data are missing today that groups like MARI could use to advance solutions in their own business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I see many interesting, some of the projects that I've seen that APHIS is doing already are really very interesting. And we're starting to explore areas of synergy where we can partner, because I think one of the things that as industry partners we can do is provide that perspective around the application of tools. I think tools are only great if they do end up at the end of the day in the hands of the people who can put them into practice. And I think the more practical application and knowledge that can be brought in at the beginning as tools, as research is framed out, the better the outcomes will be, the more applicable the outcomes will be by the end of the work, and following that through from the beginning to the application at the end and the operational use will strengthen the approach here. I think the biggest challenge we faced here is not necessarily AI tools. It's more about the data and enabling access to the right data in the right format to enable us to fully leverage AI tools, to be honest. I think there are many capabilities there, but our ability to fully leverage that and bring the data and the tools together in a way that works for all parties in the supply chain is probably one of the biggest challenges today.
That's a great segue into the next questions about data. Any thoughts on an open data exchange platform for multiple industries to use for sharing genotyping, observational info, and do you think a neutral entity could help this?
Yes, I do. And we have some examples of, genome tracker and various, which is being led through the FDA and various other, there's a good example in the US of how the labs supporting the government and food safety are pooling data and bringing that together. But that's not really fully utilized by industry yet, or integrated into tools that the industry can use. I think and we have no standardized approach to whole genome sequencing for the food supply chain. There's work started under the ISO kind of work streams to standardize that, but it's going pretty slowly. And I think it would benefit from neutral bodies being part of that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And the next question is on data analytics. Any comments on how one may approach data analytics during the early stages to have a positive impact on future regulations on a global scale?
Yeah, I think too is where there are increasingly, I think, how we work together with regulators to develop appropriate regulation that is based on meaningful data and not just necessarily driven by improved sensitivity of methods or ability to detect things. overlaying the relevance and the applicability and the meaning of the data over that is sometimes something where we could improve.
Great, thank you. We're coming up on time, so I think this next question will be our last one from the chat. What are things engineers can do to help with food safety? You've given good examples for the government and also good examples for companies giving access to data, but what can an engineer do?
And I guess I'm hoping I understand the type of engineer, because there are many different types. And I'm thinking about the engineers who work in our factories and who are kind of running the machinery that produces food. I don't know if that's the same type of engineer that Jocelyn is referring to there. But certainly we have a focus on our factories and production every day, and we produce lots of data, operational data every day that we're starting to harness in a way that enables us to real-time monitor, rather than retrospectively looking back at the day and then looking at your products and seeing what's happened to your products. We can real-time monitor and detect trends far earlier than we used to. And with that, we're kind of calling that factory in a pocket. So how does every factory manager, how does every line engineer have access to data at their fingertips that enables them to make in the moment decisions, rather than waiting till the end of a production run and then react after the run is completed. So that there's certainly, I think, data analytics is transforming day-to-day manufacturing for sure.
And I suppose all types of engineers have a hand in that, because there's also engineers that are designing that equipment and software engineers, yes, behind that side of production.
Yeah, and embedding that in manufacturing. I mean, it's moving very quickly, this space. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for all the great questions, everyone. And we will have more time for questions at our panel discussion on December 8th at 10 a.m. Pacific. So I hope that you will be able to join us then and engage in a dialogue with all of our speakers from the fall. And if you missed any of the talks, they are all available on the APHIS YouTube channel. Thank you so much again, Abby.
You're welcome.
This was a really great discussion and talk.
Thank you, Hannah.